Serve Pro of Piatt DeWitt counties for fire and water restoration, reconstruction, and now duct cleaning to keep your air healthy. Find out how they can help you by clicking their icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
Netflix buffering, YouTube spinning, devices not connecting, Zoom calls dropping. It's frustrating. Let's end your frustration by signing up for fiber internet in Clinton. Click the Connexus icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
It's the WHOW Morning Show. I'm Ben Hubbard. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin insurance agent in Clinton. Our guest in studio today on the WHOW Morning Show is Joe Witte, the DeWitt County Board Chair. Joe, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you, Ben?
Good. Thanks so much for taking time for us. And, before we got started here, we're chatting a little bit about last week's county board meeting. You said nothing too eventful going on over there. Any highlights that we should know about from that?
No, I mean, we could look through the agenda here. I would say it was just continuing to hit different items that have been wrapped up in the various committees over the last couple of months that we've been working through, but nothing too exciting. Just keeping the items that have been worked on, keeping them moving and getting some things approved. So
yeah, just looking through the agenda here, looking at public safety, that was something that we covered on WHOW not too long ago. Some changing prices on things like service fees, certified mail process service fee, fingerprinting, and things like that. Tell us a little bit about maybe why those prices are going up.
Well, we periodically we'll have to look at the fees that we choose or we charge for various services. Public safety had two different studies done recently. One was more for animal control. What we covered last week at the board meeting was the results of the cost study that was done for the sheriff's office. Mm-hmm. We are not allowed to just charge any fee that we want, for services that the sheriff's office charges or that they provide. We have to engage a third party to kind of do a cost study. So we engaged Bellwether. That's a little investment to get that study done. I think the last time we did it was maybe almost a decade ago.
Yeah, I feel like that's what the sheriff was saying.
Yeah, so the fees are kind of at that point, at that level, mm-hmm. until you have another cost study done that can justify, based on what your actual expenses are to provide those services, mm-hmm. Until you can justify an increase or, if fees need to stay the same. So Sheriff Walker did request that we do that cost study for the various services that they provide. And they got those results back, about a month ago. Mm-hmm. That gave time for Sheriff Walker to kind of go through and make some recommendations. And he brought those to public safety. Yeah. And as you mentioned, there were a few fees that we did increase or will be increasing. I don't know if the effective date was going to be the beginning of this coming month, mm-hmm. but yeah, it's not to charge more and make more money. Right. It's to find a cost that is comparable to cover the, as best we can, the expenses that, we are, we're seeing realized for providing those services.
Yeah, and it's not just that like you guys are just trying to get more money for the county so you can pay for other things. It's the cost of living is going up, and so salaries are going up, and inflation and things like that. So it's not necessarily like we don't want people out there with their pitchforks and torches outside the county building or anything talking about those sheriff's prices. Just a general thing happens every once in a while. Tell me a little bit more about cost studies in general, though. Is that a requirement? Do you guys have any ordinances that say every 10 years we'll do a cost study of the sheriff's department?
No, I don't think there's any requirement, but we can't raise those certain fees mm-hmm. unless you have that justified by a cost study. So when you think 10 years ago, or I think it was maybe 2011, 2012, when we last raised some of these fees, gas prices necessarily weren't what they are now. Labor has gone up. Mm-hmm. So the county sees increasing expenses for, just providing some of these services.
Definitely.
And at some point you start to realize that maybe what we're charging is not in line with what we're spending. And so does it make sense to potentially raise those fees? Or do you just continue to charge what we charge, starting back in, a decade or so ago. And
Right.
eventually you're gonna see that deviate enough.
Right.
It was about $10,000 to do a study.
Mhm.
So you don't want to just do this every year, right?
Right. Yeah.
You just don't. It doesn't make sense.
Those fees will be going way up.
Right. well, the thought is you spend the money to do the study.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily have to increase all your fees, and we didn't increase the fees across the board to what was necessarily what we could charge.
Mhm.
But there were several that were obviously falling behind where we should be charging a little bit more to basically offset what we're spending to provide those services. And based on the last year or so, it looks like it might take about a year or so to recoup some of the costs of that study. But the longer you wait to do that, the further and further those actual expenses are going to deviate from what we're charging. And so it might take about a year to recoup it, but then every year going beyond, we're charging a comparable rate to what we're spending. And that's the intent here, is not to try to get even more out of the citizens or those that are using these services,
Right.
but to make sure that we're not costing the taxpayers more by not charging an adequate fee for some of the services that are really not required of everybody.
Definitely. So you guys also recently, if I remember right, did a cost study for animal control. Are there any other departments that you guys are maybe looking at doing cost studies for?
None that I'm aware of at this time.
Okay.
Animal control did do a cost study around the same time. They did get their results back. But I think, as you know, from public safety, they're wanting to get a better handle on, some of where their receipts are coming in.
Yeah.
They're going to need a little bit more time before they come forward with any recommendation, if they do at all.
Right.
Not everything is intended to be a profit center. Right? Nothing really is. There's got to be certain things in the county where you have to provide a service, and it's going to cost more than what we can bring in. And you can't charge fees necessarily of the public to cover 100% of your expenses related to something like animal control. So the intent there was, are we charging a fair fee, even though it's not going to cover all the expenses that we have at an animal control? So that they need a little bit more time to look at over those results, get a better handle on, what we're taking in. As you know, Grace has taken over animal control recently and is still trying to get a good handle on the paperwork side of things. And then maybe in the near future, we might have some recommendations, but again, if we were to charge what it costs us at the animal control, we're not going to have 100% compliance, right? People are just going to turn animals loose instead of turning them over to animal control or relinquishing. You can't charge a fee for what it would cost the county to take that on.
That's something that I believe it was John Wirtz said that stuck out to me about that cost study meeting for public safety with animal control. And that's animal control is a necessary department, 100%. Like you said, have to have these services for people with animals. It's not one that will ever be profitable for the county. It's just one of those necessary things, and it's something that is a responsibility of the county government to provide for the people that live there. So it definitely makes sense that that's not always going to be profitable, not meaning you can't always look at where things are being maybe overspent. Not saying that anybody's to blame or anything like that, but just going back to the agenda here, looking at road and bridge, that's something that is just a little interesting. Guardrails going up on different roads around the area. Can you highlight what that is about on the agenda?
Yeah. So what we had to approve here was just a funding agreement. Whenever we are receiving some federal money for these types of projects, we will be contributing some, but there's also some federal funding involved. We had to approve a joint funding agreement. Basically there is a resolution for a guardrail upgrade project. I don't know exactly when that would start, but there's from what I understand, about 20 guardrails throughout the county that need upgrades. The vast majority of the funds for that would come from the federal government. We do have a portion that would come out of the motor fuel tax fund, directly for what we've collected. It'll go towards the DeWitt County's portion of that project. But this this resolution or this joint funding agreement was basically just to codify that funding, and it's again required because it is a funding from multiple sources. It's just, approving the county side of that.
So can we get into the details a little bit about that funding agreement? Why is the money coming from the federal government and not maybe something like the Illinois Department of Transportation, for those road guardrails? Why is it coming from the federal government?
I think sometimes I can't speak to why this particular project is the way it is, but there are times where some of the funds may come from IDOT.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, this particular project, it looks like, I want to say 80% of it was federal funds and 20% would be DeWitt County funds. I think we'll learn more about this project as as we get closer to actually kicking it off, but this is just kind of setting up the funding side of it. And then I think Road and Bridge will continue to work through the details of the project as we get closer. Yeah. Again, I don't know. We didn't really talk so much about a timeline for the project itself, but I think this is really one of the first things that you got to get done to get that started. So
100%. Once again, Joe Witte, the DeWitt County Board Chair on the WHOW Morning Show. Joe, before we take a break here, is there anything from last week's county board meeting we didn't get to that you wanted to highlight?
We've got a couple items from finance that we can get into. Maybe, I don't know if you want to do that after break, but we did have the health insurance for the employees that came up. Let's see, from old and new business, there's a few items on there. The one for the training use of the sheriff's office, so we can get into any more detail on those.
Let's take a quick break before we go ahead and do that. Once again, Joe Witte, the DeWitt County Board Chair on the WHOW Morning Show. We'll be right back.
WHOW.
WeNow.com.
Let's check the markets now on the RFD Radio Network. I'm Jim Taylor. Lower across the board with corn, beans, and Chicago wheat. May corn down 5 1/4, 473 1/2. July corn 480 down 5 1/2. New crop December 448 3/4 down 7. May beans 1044 down 5 3/4. July beans down 5 1/2, 1053 3/4. New crop November 1029 down 6. May Chicago wheat 512 1/4 down 17 3/4. July wheat down 17 528. May bean meal down $4 286 even. May bean oil 49.36 up 8 cents. Livestock market, May feeders up again today 187 292.40. April live cattle 215.27 up $1 and June lean hogs 101.67 up 52 cents. Energy market, June crude oil 62.35 down 67 cents. Jim Taylor on the RFD Radio Network.
There's a reason WHOW is the Big 1520 across central Illinois. That's because anytime the sun is up, you can hear WHOW's big signal from Jacksonville to Peoria, from Pontiac to the Indiana state line, and to Charleston and Effingham. Anywhere you travel in central Illinois, take WHOW, the Big 1520, with you in your car, truck, or tractor. Just another reason why WHOW is Central Illinois' news, agriculture, and talk station.
If you've got allergies this season, we have relief. CEO Paul Scarin here from Warner Hospital and Health Services in Clinton. Come to our walk-in clinic inside our family medicine. No appointment, no problem. See our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
DeWittDailyNews.com is the area's leading local news source 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get the latest local news, obituaries, police blotter, weather forecast, and more with no paywall. Head to DeWittDailyNews.com to get the local information you need to know.
Your friend in Central Illinois. WHOW.
It's the WHOW Morning Show. I'm Ben Hubbard, and the WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin insurance agent in Clinton. Once again, our guest in studio today, Joe Witte, the DeWitt County Board Chair. Joe, as we are looking at the agenda from last week's DeWitt County Board meeting, jumping into the finance report from one Mrs. Melanie Tilley, looking at some new health insurance details. Do you want to go over that real quick for us?
Yeah, so we have open enrollment coming up pretty soon. I think July, we have open enrollment for the health plan options for our employees.
Yep.
everywhere health insurance seems to get more and more expensive.
Of course.
And so, we were kind of excited this year that, even though our quote for the insurance for county employees' health would increase premium some this year, we were able to find a third option. So historically, I think the last several years they've had two options. We got a quote this year where we could add a third option that would actually be at a lesser cost to employees.
Oh.
And it seems like it's a fairly decent plan too. So what we covered last month, they went over the details of those plans in finance, and then we looked at that, at the county board level, took their recommendation, which is basically keep the same two options that we've offered employees in the past if they want. That would increase in cost a little bit for the employees. But there's a third option that we were able to make available. The county's cost, what we contributed as an employer, would remain the same, but the employees would have an option to reduce their premium for a very comparable and adequate insurance if they so choose. So, it's not every year that you can do that. Every year, premiums are going to fluctuate and they tend to rise. But we were kind of pleased that we had, a good year, a nice quote, and minimal impact to both the county and the employees this year as far as the actual premiums charged. So we did approve that. We've got open enrollment coming, and I think in the months ahead, there will be opportunities for any employees who are looking at those plans to come in and ask some questions of, the gentleman, Mr. Johnson, who kind of offered the details at finance for us. So that did get approved, and so those will be coming up here in the next couple of months. Yeah.
It's just awesome that, more options is always better, and so being able to be a county employee and have the option to, where if you need to, you can lower that premium and select that different plan. That's always a great opportunity. And it kind of makes me curious, in what ways are you as a county board making the county a better place to work as an employee?
Well, you want to make sure that the premiums, because there are going to be years where those might jump significantly. And I think that has happened over the last couple of years, and the county has picked up a larger portion of the cost. So I think for the last 3 years, the county has, last 2 years prior to this one, has increased what they've contributed to those plans, so that the cost to the employee, they didn't see the brunt of that increase or any increase. And this year we were excited that, there's a very comparable plan that won't cost any more to the employer, the county, or the employee or the employee. So, you just never know what the next year is going to bring. You have a bad year with experience, and we might get a higher quote next year, a larger premium increase. So you just take it year by year. But I know the finance committee does a very good job of trying to make sure that we are not impacting the employees by, them feeling the brunt of any type of increase, and that they've been very successful, I think, the last 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to touch on one more thing on the agenda, and that is the motion to approve resolution approving agreement between the Public Safety Training Foundation and the county. Let's get a little bit into that training facility. What is that, or who is that used by? And let's talk about that agreement.
Yeah, and I think when you get Sheriff Walker in here, he could probably get more into the details of the facility itself. But what we needed to do is really, Macon County's got a great facility for training the law enforcement.
Yeah,
and this agreement was essentially codifying that we as DeWitt County Sheriff's Office and his employees, they can use this facility in Macon County, which helps with training a lot of scenarios. A facility that we don't have a comparable option here in DeWitt County.
Yeah,
so they are graciously allowing us to use that facility for training. It basically is opening it up to the sheriff's office at no cost.
Wow.
But it's also making sure that we're not going to hold them liable for any incidents or accidents that happen while there.
Right.
I think it's a great opportunity. We appreciate that Macon County is making this even available to the sheriff's office, and from what I understand, it just gives the sheriff's office, the opportunity to train in scenarios that we would have a difficult time accomplishing here. Active shooter events. They have, from what I understand, the ability to, create smoke, things like that. So,
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer for us. We've got to give, the sheriff the opportunity to get his folks trained. And if it's no cost to DeWitt County, and it helps us be able to respond and train for those types of events if they were ever to occur here, I think it's a great opportunity to just
always trying to better your pardon me, always trying to find opportunities to make your law enforcement better is always a great idea. And unfortunately, as we're running out of time here, I got about a minute and a half with you without getting too deep into the weeds on anything. Are there any things that we could be looking forward to for next county board meeting that people should be keeping an eye out for this next month?
Well, we did have a motion to look at the wind energy ordinance that has been in the pipeline. We're really at a couple different reviews going on, from the RPC land use that went to the ZBA. We brought that up at the last meeting, but are not taking any action. Didn't take any action this month.
Yeah,
we want to take another month to kind of compare all of the different recommendations that have come forward from the various committees, and our intent would be to likely take action on that one next month. Again, this wouldn't impact any active projects, but it would impact any future projects. And it's just trying to make sure that our ordinance, based on what we've learned over the last several years, captures some lessons learned, and we deal with some of those gaps. So there's been a few things in the works, but no action this month, and I know that the land or ZBA will be taking up the battery storage ordinance that we discussed a little bit.
Yeah.
In that case, it's something that we don't have any ordinance for today, but we want to make sure that if we do get an application somewhere in the future, that we're prepared. So
absolutely,
kind of looking ahead to what comes out of ZBA in the coming months as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good place to end it off here. Once again, on the WHOW Morning Show, it's Joe Witte, the DeWitt County Board Chair. Thanks so much for taking time for me today, Joe.
Anytime. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, it's the WHOW Morning Show. I'm Ben Hubbard. We'll be right back.
WHOW.
The Big 1520 WHOW Clinton, 92.3 FM, W222 BG Clinton,